Hello there. I just came back from a trip to Mexico. I spent 2 weeks there. And most of the time, I was in Puerto Vallarta, enjoying the ocean, walking through town, watching everyday life unfold the way it does in places where the rhythm of life feels just a little bit slower. People opening their shops in the morning, families out walking in the evenings, and kids running along the beach. And then suddenly things changed. During this time, there was some security concerns connected to a cartel violence, um, and the area went into lockdown. So stay indoors, stay inside, stay safe. Nothing catastrophic happened where we were, but the atmosphere shifted almost overnight. Restaurants closed and closed early for probably a couple of days. People stayed indoors. Hotels were locked down. Nobody come in, nobody come out. Flights in and out of Puerto Vallarta were canceled. So leaving people in the resort that were supposed to be at home and not allowing people to come to the resort who had reservations because they couldn't get there. The planes wouldn't fly. So people stayed indoors, and police presence and army presence increased, like with helicopters flying overhead and armed trucks with army personnel in them patrolling the streets. And like everyone else in the area, we were advised to remain in our hotel until things settled down. And so after a couple of days, the situation stabilized and we were able to travel home back to Canada safely. But the experience stayed with me because when something like that happens, you start thinking about the world in a slightly different way. And then the very evening I arrived back home, the conflict in the Middle East escalated. And suddenly, the world felt heavy, felt like out of control. So not just because of the news itself, but because of what it does to us emotionally when we watch these things unfolding around the world. So today I'd like to talk about the emotional weight of the world at this time and what we actually do with it. How do we make sense of it all? So when you're sitting in a hotel room during something like a lockdown, your mind does what human minds always do. It starts asking questions. Not dramatic questions, just practical ones like, what's really happening and how serious is this? And are we safe where we are? I remember standing near the window in the hotel room and noticing how quiet the street had become. No traffic, no foot traffic, no anything. Usually Puerto Vallarta is full of movement, taxis and buses going by, people walking, music coming from restaurants, just a lot of hubbub. But that morning and that first day, things felt unusually still. You notice little things like that. You check your phone more often than usual. You listen for updates. And even though the situation stabilized over a couple of days, those first hours remind you of something very important. Most of us move through life assuming stability. I know I do. We assume that our plans will unfold roughly the way we expect. Flights will leave on time. Cities will operate normally. Travel will go as planned. And most of the time, they do. But moments like that I experienced remind us that the world is a complicated place. And sometimes that awareness stays with us long after the moment itself has gone. So we were never designed for this much global awareness. I realize that one of the strange realities of modern life is that we now experience the entire planet in real time. Every crisis, every conflict, every disaster. And while that awareness can build compassion, it also places a psychological load on us that human beings were never really designed to hold on to, or to have, or to experience. Our brains evolved to care deeply about a relatively small circle of people, family, neighbors, community. But now our phones bring the suffering of the entire world directly into our living rooms. War, political instability, human tragedy. And while it's good that we care, we also have to recognize something important. Feeling overwhelmed by world events doesn't mean that we're weak. It means that we're human. So, what about the quiet stress that many of us carry? Well, I've noticed something in conversations lately. Many thoughtful people seem to be holding on to a quiet background stress about what's happening in the world. Not panic, not hysteria, just a steady sense that things feel kind of unsettled. You hear it in comments like, things feel unstable right now, or I'm trying not to watch the news too much. I've said that one myself. And sometimes there's a little guilt attached to that, as if protecting our own peace somehow means that we're ignoring the suffering of others. But emotional responsibility has its limits. And understanding those limits is part of staying healthy over the long term. So, what about that thing called compassion fatigue? Is that real? There's a phrase that psychologists use called compassion fatigue. It happens when people care deeply about suffering, but are exposed to so much of it that their emotional system becomes exhausted. So, healthcare workers can experience this, aid workers can experience it. But in the digital age, ordinary people experience it too. Because every day, our phones deliver another wave of human tragedy. War, violence, kidnapping, disaster. If we try to personally carry all of that, absorb all of that, eventually we burn out. And when people burn out emotionally, well, something unfortunate happens. They stop caring altogether. That's the real danger. Not caring too little as the danger, but caring so much that eventually you shut down. Coming home from Mexico with all of this unfolding around the world has made me take a break, to pause, to think. Because in about 2 weeks, I'm supposed to travel to Spain. And like many people right now, I find myself asking the kinds of questions that come up whenever the world feels a little uncertain. Is this a good time to travel? How stable is the world right now? What risks are reasonable? When the news cycle is full of conflict, it's easy for your mind to start filling in the worst case scenarios. And I suspect I'm not the only person doing that. A lot of people right now are probably quietly reconsidering their plans, reconsidering their trips and their travel, and even everyday decisions about where to go and what feels safe. But at the same time, something else is also true. Millions of people are continuing their lives. Planes are still flying. Cities are still welcoming visitors. And families are still taking vacations. So the real question becomes something more personal. How do we stay aware of the world without letting fear quietly shrink the boundaries of our lives? These aren't simple questions, and everyone answers them differently. But I suspect many of us are thinking about them right now. So, where's the balance? Maybe the real challenge isn't how to avoid the emotional weight of the world. Maybe it's how to balance it wisely, how to carry it wisely, how to think about it wisely, to care without collapsing under the pressure of the caring, to stay informed without becoming consumed with it, to remain compassionate without burning out. That balance is something every generation has to learn in its own way. And right now, many of us are learning it together. If the world has felt a little heavier for you lately, you're not imagining it. A lot is happening. But even in uncertain times, ordinary life still goes on. People still gather for dinner, children play on the beaches, and neighbors still help each other. And those ordinary moments matter more than we can sometimes realize, because they remind us what we're actually trying to protect. I'd really be interested to hear from you. When the world feels complicated, what helps you stay steady? I'd really like to hear your thoughts. And as always, however you're navigating it, I'm glad we're thinking about it together. I am going to record a crew episode, hopefully answering similar questions to what we're asking here. And, we always enjoy the feedback and the help from our friend Anne, who takes advantage of not only expressing herself and her personal learnings over the years, but also sometimes she puts her coaching hat on and she helps us through some kind of not rough times necessarily, but those times that cause us to think a little bit more and maybe are a little bit adding to the turmoil of the day. So I invite you to check into the feed and have a look at that cruise session. There's probably going to be at least one or two of them. So until later, take care, stay calm, stay focused, and be good. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.